everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving headfirst into your EQAI Morning Briefing for October 21st.
Always an exciting way to start the day.
Right. Imagine getting a clear picture of everything that's happening from crypto to corporate leadership, all before you even finish your first cup of coffee.
Efficiency is key.
You got it. So let's get right to it. We've got European investors making some interesting moves with Bitcoin. Election buzz is really making waves in the crypto market. And we've got a CEO winning praise from Harvard business experts for, get this, jam sessions.
Jam sessions. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, you heard that right. Let's dive in.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first up, Bitcoin. The briefing mentions European investors pouring a record amount, we are talking $105 billion, into U.S. Bitcoin ETFs.
Wow, that's a significant chunk of change.
For sure. But here's the thing. The price of Bitcoin is still kind of just hanging out, hovering below $70,000.
Interesting.
Yeah, you would think with everyone so gung-ho about Bitcoin, the price would be skyrocketing. So what gives?
You've hit on a really important point, which is that institutional interest doesn't automatically equal some kind of immediate price surge. There's more to it than that.
Oh, so it's more complicated than just follow the money.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
So one thing to consider is the types of institutions making the investment. Pension funds, for example, they are looking at the really long game. They have a much longer investment horizon compared to, say, hedge funds.
So a pension fund making a big investment, that's a sign of long-term confidence.
Right, but it won't necessarily cause any sort of short-term price spike.
So it's not just about how much money is being invested, but also who is doing the investing.
Exactly. And then you've got the whole regulatory landscape to consider. That always plays a huge role, especially when it comes to crypto. Take the upcoming U.S. elections, for instance, a potential Republican win. It's creating a real buzz, a lot of uncertainty and speculation.
How so?
Well, there's this idea floating around that a Republican win means a more, shall we say, crypto-friendly regulatory environment.
Okay, so are you saying investors are basically placing bets on which way the political winds are going to blow?
You got it.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a report that highlighted something like $2.2 billion flowing into different crypto products.
Wow. And you are saying a good portion of that is tied to this election?
It seems that way. A lot of that investment, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, is being driven by these potential policy shifts. And it shows you just how much political events can impact the markets,
Yeah.
especially in a space like crypto, which is still relatively new and constantly evolving.
So it's like this whole layer of complexity on top of an already complex market.
It definitely adds another layer to consider.
So we have this cautious optimism around Bitcoin.
Or maybe cautious speculation. It's hard to say for sure.
True. But then we have ApeCoin, which saw a 100% price surge after the ApeChain launch and the Layer 0 integration. So what's happening there?
Well, ApeCoin, that's a really good example of what happens when you've got actual technological advancement underpinning a cryptocurrency's value. It's not just hype. This integration of Layer 0, which is a protocol that allows for, seamless communication across different blockchains.
Okay, so wait. For those of us who don't speak fluent blockchain, break it down for us. Why is this Layer 0 such a big deal?
Okay, so imagine you have all these different blockchain ecosystems. They each have their own, strengths and limitations,
Okay.
With Layer 0, it's like this universal translator, this bridge. It lets all of these different ecosystems interact and share information really easily.
So what does that mean for something like ApeCoin?
For ApeCoin, it means way more functionality, more scalability, and the potential for a lot wider adoption.
And all of those things boost its value.
Exactly. And I think it highlights the potential for blockchain to really shake things up. And not just in finance. This technology has the power to disrupt a whole bunch of industries.
So Bitcoin may get all the headlines.
But it is not the only game in town.
Right. The crypto world is so much bigger than that. And ApeCoin, that's a great example of how dynamic and constantly evolving this space really is. Speaking of evolution, let's shift gears from the digital world to the corporate world. This EQAI briefing highlights a CEO that's turning heads, even at Harvard, for something called jam sessions.
Now you're talking my language. Leadership insights are always fascinating.
Right. So this is Thasunda Brown Duckett, the CEO of TIAA.
Okay, I know TIAA. What are these jam sessions all about?
That's the million-dollar question. What are these jam sessions, and why are people so excited about them?
Well, think of them as these really productive meetings, but way cooler. Duckett basically gets together with small groups of employees from all across TIAA.
So anyone from like entry level all the way up to the executive suite.
Yeah, pretty much. It's all about fostering a culture of open communication.
So kind of breaking down those traditional corporate hierarchies.
Yeah, exactly. And the folks at Harvard are loving this approach.
Oh yeah, the briefing mentioned that leadership experts are really impressed.
They are. Because it boils down to one crucial element for successful leadership: trust.
Right. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything.
Exactly. These jam sessions show that Duckett is really committed to listening to her employees. She values their input, and that goes a long way in building trust and a sense of, shared purpose.
Which is something we talked about with investors too, right? Like they want to see that transparency and that trust.
Absolutely. It's all connected. Look, in today's job market, companies really need to prioritize employee well-being. Open communication, inclusive leadership. That's how you attract and keep the best people.
It's a good reminder that the best leaders aren't just removed from everything, sitting in their corner office. They're present.
Totally agree.
Okay, so we have covered groundbreaking Bitcoin investments, ApeCoin and its potential, and a CEO who is really changing the leadership game. Let's move on to the next big story from this EQI briefing. We have a huge merger in the cybersecurity world. Sophos and SecureWorks are joining forces. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a big deal. Both Sophos and SecureWorks, they are powerhouses on their own, right? But together, they are a force to be reckoned with, especially when it comes to navigating the world of cyber threats.
Yeah, the briefing actually mentioned that this merger really speaks to the growing complexity of cyber threats.
Oh, absolutely. We aren't talking about just a couple of hackers in their basement anymore. It's way more sophisticated than that. Cyber attacks now, these are often highly organized, well-funded operations. They are using some seriously advanced tactics. This merger lets Sophos and SecureWorks pool their resources and their expertise.
So it's like building a cybersecurity fortress.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Look, they're creating a much more comprehensive defense against these evolving threats. It's a wake-up call for businesses of all sizes, though. Cybersecurity. It's not just a one-time thing.
Right, like you get that one software and call it a day. It doesn't work that way.
Nope. It has to be an ongoing strategy, always evolving, because the threats are always evolving.
You've got to stay one step ahead.
Always. Okay, now let's turn to the U.S. economy. Dallas Fed Chief Lori Logan, she gave her assessment recently, and I think she sums it up pretty well.
Yeah, what was it? Strong and stable, but with meaningful uncertainties. I believe those were her words.
That's exactly right. She nailed it. We're seeing good things, job growth, consumer spending is resilient, but, and this is a big but, we have got inflation.
Which is still sticking around, despite the Fed's best efforts.
It is, and it's making things really tricky for policymakers. Think about it. The Fed, they're walking this tightrope, trying to keep the economy growing without letting inflation get out of control.
Easier said than done, I'm sure. So how do they even begin to do that? What are their options?
Well, one of their main tools is adjusting interest rates.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lower rates usually stimulates the economy. Borrowing becomes cheaper, businesses invest more. But there's always a but. If the economy gets too hot too fast, well,
inflation could come roaring back.
Bingo. It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah.
and that is definitely a challenge.
Especially when you consider everything else that factors into the equation. We've got domestic issues, global events.
And let's not forget market sentiment.
Oh, right, because how people feel about the market can really make things unpredictable.
Yeah, psychology plays a big role.
Speaking of unpredictable, we were talking about Boeing earlier, and the briefing mentioned something really interesting. Historically, whenever there is a labor strike, their stock actually goes up. It seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does, but that's the market for you. But here's the thing. This time around, it sounds like things might be different.
Really? Why is that?
Well, past performance, it's not always a perfect predictor, especially in today's market. Things change so fast.
So are you saying we should just forget about historical data when we are trying to figure out what the market's going to do?
Not necessarily. It can still give you some context. But you got to remember that markets are constantly evolving. What might have moved Boeing's stock price in the past, it might not have the same impact today.
So it's like assuming you know what the weather's going to be based on looking back at the same day last year.
That's a great way to put it. The economy, geopolitics, even technology, those are all constantly shifting, creating a different playing field.
Okay, so big takeaway for our listeners. How do we make sense of all of this uncertainty without getting totally overwhelmed?
You've got to balance that awareness of the past with a willingness to adapt. Stay informed, diversify, and be ready for the unexpected.
Words to live by. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into our EQAI morning briefing.
It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has. We've gone from the intricacies of Bitcoin investments and that whole world to the potential of blockchain technology, like what we're seeing with ApeCoin. And then we shifted gears entirely to corporate leadership in those jam sessions. And of course, we talked about the big challenges like cybersecurity threats and the economy.
It's fascinating how these things all connect, isn't it?
It really is. And for our listeners, remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have only got so much time in a day, right? But keep those questions coming. Keep that curiosity alive.
And we'll be back to dive into another briefing very soon.
We'll see you next time.